How would you feel if you were a man on a dating site looking at the profile with an image of a beautiful woman and a verification badge by the UK government that said this was most definitely a woman, only to find out that in fact it's a man? Conversely, how would you feel if you were a woman on a dating site looking at the profile of what looks like a handsome man with a verification badge by the UK government to say this was most definitely a man, only to find out that in fact it was born as a woman? But now let's turn the heat up a bit. How would you feel as a woman or as a man if it was your wife or your daughter going to a treatment that you believed was being provided by a woman, and let's say it was an intimate examination or treatment of some kind or another, and they had a verification badge by the UK government to say that the person providing the treatment or the consultation or whatever was most definitely a woman, only in fact there's an obscurity in the process and it might in fact be a man. Only there's no way to know now because this is a UK government-backed verification which might in fact be false. That is exactly the situation we have here, which I'm going to explain in this video. So first of all, please do subscribe to the channel to support my channel, help me grow. I am independent and I will remain so. But in this video, I have to give thanks, credit and support to Mayor Forstater and Sex Matters for raising this concern, because whilst I've touched on a little bit of the subject matter here, which is the Data Use and Access Bill, which goes a long way towards identification and verification and this sort of thing, what it's actually likely to do, unless it's amended, which I'll explain in this video, it is likely to allow gender self-ID by the back door. Despite the Supreme Court ruling that woman means adult female, man means adult man of any age and whatever, and sex has its biological meaning, and a woman's space is for women only, and a men's space is for men only, and women's sports are for women only, etc., etc. You get the picture. Now, there are certain issues with potential discrimination for gender reassignment, but that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is we could end up with a government-endorsed, government-backed verification, which is flat out wrong, which is the worst kind of verification, because you've got a verification badge from the government saying this is true, when it's not. That's what we call a false positive, and it's going to cause significant concerns. Let me jump back to, I will show you, I will link all these below. You can go and read them in full. I'll read snippets of it out. But this requires your help, and Sex Matters is asking for your help here. Jumping to the point, there is a template letter to send to your MP to support an amendment to this bill here. The bill being the Data Use and Access Bill, which is going to introduce a lot of things, but among those, there is this amendment here, which I've brought on screen here. The amendment is as follows: that directions to public authorities on the recording of sex data. It requires that they collect, process, and retain sex data only where it's lawful to do so in accordance with data protection legislation, that they request and record sex data accurately in every circumstance where sex data is collected. In accordance with following category terms and definitions: sex, meaning male or female based on the sex at birth, natal sex, or biological sex, these terms carrying the same meaning and capable of being used interchangeably, and as defined and clarified by the Supreme Court ruling just recently. And in addition, where it's lawful to do so in accordance with the Data Protection Legislation and Gender Recognition Act, etc., acquired gender, being male or female. So this amendment says, let's make sure we record this data accurately. So if the verification badge says this is a woman, it is a woman, a biological woman at birth, and where appropriate, to record the acquired gender. So if said woman has obtained a gender recognition certificate to be a man or vice versa, then that's the acquired gender for various purposes under the Gender Recognition Act, but not under the Equality Act. And that is obviously the subject of huge debate just recently, but it is absolutely crystal clear. There is no ambiguity whatsoever. You can see my previous videos about that. But what is the problem here in a bit more detail? Please do stick with me, because this is absolutely critical. Because the outline hook of this video, if you like, think of all the scenarios that you could go to that you would want to be absolutely crystal clear and certain that the person with whom you are dealing is male or female. Think of it a man going for an examination. You want to be absolutely sure that it's another man doing it because it's kind of an intimate thing. Or if it's a woman going for any kind of examination or treatment or whatever, they've been the subject of huge debate just recently as well. Now, I'm not a woman, but I could think that if I were a woman, I would probably want to have certain examinations done by a woman. And your wife, your daughter, whomever, you might want them to have these examinations and treatments done by a woman as opposed to a man. You may reasonably object to that. Some of you may not. That's perfectly fine. A lot of you may not. But let me jump to this document here. I will try not to read all of it out, as I sometimes tend to do, because I get carried away. I like reading, and I like reading things out because I don't want to miss off any detail, etc. Let me move it so it's a little bit better on screen. There we go. Let's take a look at this, shall we? So, this data use and access bill is going to establish the legislative framework for digital verification services. Digital ID. So a lot of you don't like it already. I get that. I have my serious concerns about it as well, particularly with this government. These enable people to prove who they are, key facts about themselves, attributes, etc. The key bit here is that they're going to carry a government trust mark. So you go to prove to an employer or whoever else that these details are absolutely correct. So let's say we have a service provider and they want to be absolutely sure who is filling a certain role, etc. And the person turns up to guarantee that they are a woman, but in fact, they're a biological man. They will have a digital ID with a government trust mark that says they are a woman, when in fact, that is patently false. This system, this explains, relies on public authorities to provide trusted and trustworthy information to registered digital verification services operating according to the new framework of rules under this information gateway. Sex, male or female, is a key fact about people. Sex is not the same as gender identity. In fact, without being rude to anybody and without ridiculing anybody, I promise I'm not doing that, but some people just don't accept this at all, and that's a perfectly philosophical belief to hold. Some people don't accept gender ID at all. People think that you are male or female, that's it, that's the end of it, there's no discussion. You are a man or you are a woman, and there's no changing to it. Some people believe that if you think that you are something else, then that's just something wrong with you and not everybody else. That is what some people believe. And again, I caveat, I'm not saying this to be rude to anybody. This goes on. It's data that is often needed in situations such as healthcare, sports, single-sex services, safeguarding, consent and equality monitoring. The legal and practical importance of sex data is indisputable. It's been confirmed by the recent Supreme Court ruling in For Women Scotland. This digital verification system is designed to be privacy-preserving and consent-based, allowing people to remain in control of how their data is used by sharing individual pieces of personal data accurately with the express user consent on each specific occasion. This differing from paper documents which reveal more information, etc. Now here's the key bit here. When asked to verify someone's sex, the information gateway on any data verification app should reliably respond with the person's actual sex, not their gender identity. Otherwise, emphasized, the system is likely to be unlawful and fail. It will be challenged in court at the cost of millions in legal fees, and we think it's clear that they will also lose public trust and may never get off the ground. And I have to add my support here because whilst some people are debating it, it is absolutely clear. The Supreme Court said that the equality referred to biological sex only. It did not change from the Sex Discrimination Act in 1975. It always meant man and woman, and that's all it could ever have meant. It never meant anything else. The Gender Recognition Act brought about the recognition to a degree of gender identity, but whilst some people are arguing that this case, the Goodwin case that brought this about for the Gender Recognition Act, they believe that this meant that they get all the same rights as biological men, biological women. That's just not the case. It's not true, never could have been true. It would have made an absolute nonsense and absurdity of the whole thing, and that is very broadly what the Supreme Court said. It'd be too confusing, and the only thing that makes sense is that it's biological male and biological female. But the problem here is this. If they are pulling data that is not reliably recording the person's actual sex, then they're going to verify the wrong thing. They're going to verify someone as a woman based on their gender identity as opposed to their biological sex. And that, I suggest, is a serious problem. The problem here is, as this goes on, what's caused this problem? Many public bodies, including the NHS and the police, have stopped collecting accurate data on sex. often replacing it by self-declared gender identity or by a confused, undefined hybrid of gender identity and sex. This is where it's always been a problem. I've always said that this is a serious problem because it's a bit of a nonsense. Again, I'm not being rude, but it is a bit of a nonsense because if you're biologically male but your gender is recorded legally as female, then this is just going to cause confusion at somewhere along the line. And it's going to end up, as I think we are in this position, it's going to end up and cause a paradoxical problem that is just not capable of resolution, where you might have, as the examples have been given, you might have a man who has gone through the process to have a GRC and even surgeries or whatever to be a woman. But since the Supreme Court ruling, those women's spaces are defined on biology and the biology of said person remains a man, so they cannot use that space. But it may be lawful to exclude them from the men's as well because they look too much like a woman. And vice versa. You may have a woman who remains a biological woman who has been through the whole process, maybe a GRC, to become legally gendered as a man, but is legally excluded from the men, but also legally excluded from the women's as well because they look too much like a man to be in the women's. That is the problem that all of this has caused. And I have every sympathy with those that have genuine gender dysphoria, but this is the very real problem that we have. What we can't do is just replace all of that and say, well, none of women's rights matter, they can use those spaces, and vice versa. None of men's rights matter, they can use those spaces. But here's the real problem with this bill if it's not amended. So I'll come back to the amendment and what you do about it in just a moment. But reading on here, many bodies have stopped collecting this data. We've ended up with a hybrid of confusing data. The problem was comprehensively illustrated in the Sullivan Review of Data, Statistics and Research on Sex and Gender. It's estimated that 100,000 people have their sex wrongly recorded in some records. Public bodies that replace sex with gender identity are likely to be breaching the Equality Act. I agree with that. And the Data Protection Act. And I agree with that as well. The data protection principle is that it's got to be recorded accurately. And I would consider myself rather specialist in equality, data protection, and all of those kind of laws. I read on. The result is what computer scientists call garbage in, garbage out. Poor quality data input resulting in poor quality data output. Fixing this is urgent. Without immediate action, bad data from the public authorities will flow through the new information gateway. Good and bad data will be mixed together, and it will be impossible to ever use digital verification services to provide accurate verified information about a person's sex. In short, because once it's verified, there is no way then to unravel this mess of some of it's real, some of it's not, and how on earth will you ever know for sure? Answer, you probably won't, or it'll take a long time and a lot of money to do so. But here's where we get to the real problem. Whilst on the one hand, the existing problem of paper documents was already bad, this will be much worse. In this scenario, they will also be able to verify their sex without ever revealing their name or any other personal information at the same time. And this is by design, to treat each bit of information that they want to verify discreetly so they don't have to verify and really reveal all of it at the same time. Treating each piece of information separately preserves maximum privacy, passing on only the information required and asked for on each occasion. However, this is the bit that I opened the video with and the bit that's highlighted here. And I'll leave you to read the rest of the document yourself. But when data on sex is false, the results will be to enable fraudsters and predators. A man will be able to create a false persona online with a false name and a picture of an attractive woman, as he can now, but then add a false verification of the sex on the persona. Currently, he would have to show a document connected to his real name and photograph. This apparent proof that he's female will be backed by the government, and it will help catfishing, online sex-based deception for sexual or other fraudulent purposes. That is what I described at the outset of the video. So what do we do about this? Well, that's where we come back to this amendment here. This amendment, because this has been going through the House of Lords and then the House of Commons, if I find the page here. It's been going through the House of Lords, now it's going through the House of Commons, and there's this amendment which has been jumping around documents here. This is amendment that's been tabled to make this a requirement to only record biological birth sex and, where appropriate, gender identity, to maintain that as well. So what you need to do is jump onto this website of Sex Matters, which I'll link below, and take this template letter if you are so inclined and you agree with what I've said and you agree with what Sex Matters say. Take this letter here, find your MP's name and email address. You can do that on this website here. Find your name, you can put your location in here. And then you can take this template letter, you're writing in support as a concerned constituent to strongly urge support for the proposed amendment, etc. And you can take this here. I'll link this below. Go take a look at it. If you think anything that I've said in here is somewhat alarming, which quite frankly, as a bit of a data specialist myself, I do specialize in data protection, GDPR and all this sort of stuff. I mean, there's a lot that I don't like about GDPR, let's be honest, but I am sort of a specialist in data protection and all of these sorts of areas. I think this is not just a recipe for disaster and the usual adages. I think this is quite possibly one of the most damaging things we might see for a very long time in terms of personal data. I strongly urge you to support it. The links are below. Go and check it out. Please remember to subscribe to my channel for brutally honest, independent commentary. And of course, thank you for watching.